Hi, I'm Barbara Ash, National Director of the Veteran Institute for Procurement, and I would like to welcome you to today's VIP webinar, Thriving in GSA Multiple Award Schedule Consolidation World. On October 1st, 2019, just this last October, GSA released its highly anticipated Multiple Award Schedule Solicitation, MAS, which it is known as, consolidates and streamlines the legacy 24 schedules into a single vehicle for commercial products, services, and solutions, creating a new world of opportunities for contractors and agencies. In this webinar, you will learn how to ensure that your solutions stand out in the consolidated world. Hope Lane and Vanessa Wilson will highlight the opportunities and challenges to successfully manage a MAS contract, including lowered barriers to entry for new and existing schedule holders, impact of new, broader service and product categories, pursuing contract modifications and overall contract management, potential new compliance and audit risks. Is it possible for MAS sales to become too much of a good thing? Today's presentation does assume an understanding of the fundamental concepts of schedule contracting. The slides and audio from today's webinar will be made available on the VIP resource page following this broadcast. Please submit your questions throughout today's presentation. We will try to address some of them at the end of today's webinar, and any questions that we cannot answer live, we will submit to the presenters after the broadcast and send the answers out to you when they are available. Now, before I introduce Hope and Vanessa, we would like to take a quick poll of today's audience. The question is, how many GSA schedules do you have? Please select A, none, B, one, C, more than one. The poll is now open. Okay, poll results are out. Interesting, great results. Thank you, I appreciate you providing that feedback. That's very helpful to the presenters. Now, it is truly a pleasure to introduce Hope Lane and Vanessa Wilson. Hope Lane leads Aronson's government contract consulting practice with more than 25 years of broad-based experience in the government contracting arena. She is well known as one of the industry's most knowledgeable thought leaders in contract-related financial compliance and contract administration. As an avid advocate for the government contracting industry, Hope is a guest speaker and lecturer for associations and industry trade groups and a featured speaker at Aronson's executive briefings. She is joined by her colleague, Vanessa Wilson, who is a managing consultant in Aronson's Government Contracting Solutions Group. With more than 15 years of full life cycle government contracts and consulting experience, her expertise includes GSA contract management, subcontract administration, contractor task order proposals, and Big Four management consulting in the areas of process improvement, business process reengineering, cost accounting, survey development analysis, workflow mapping, and facilitation services. Vanessa specializes in GSA schedule contract preparation, renewals, and providing ongoing contract management, administration, and compliance support with a special interest in organizational procedure and policy review improvements and standardization. As you can see, you are in very good hands today. So with that, I will now turn today's webinar over to Hope and Vanessa.
Well, thank you, Barbara, and thank you to the Veterans Institute for allowing Aronson and us to come in and speak today about the exciting things that are happening in the GSA schedules world. It has been quite a year. This is an initiative that GSA and Aronson has been following for more than 18 months now. My team members have been so deep in the weeds on this. I frequently think that GSA should be paying us for the consulting services we're providing to GSA to keep them straight on all of the changes they're making, especially Vanessa. Vanessa frequently is QCing the new documents that GSA releases and letting them kindly know about the discrepancies so that they can fix them in the next version. We're thrilled to have so many of you here today to hear about this topic. Very interesting results from our polling question. I am certainly glad that we did the polling question. A little bit different than what we were expecting, but that's quite all right. There's something in the program for everyone. Today, as you know, we're going to talk about the multiple award schedules, so consolidation, going from the previous 24 individual schedules to the now singular MAS schedule. How are we going to thrive in this environment? And making sure in our final insights to talk about those compliance areas that are most problematic that you need to really pay attention to stay on the good side of GSA and to keep from getting in trouble and having to give money back to the government and those types of things. So to get started today, you already heard about the two of us. We're thrilled to be here. We're going to compare and contrast. How was the environment before in the 24 individual schedules compared to how it is now in the single schedule? What are the new opportunities that this provides to the government and to you as contractors in that space? What challenges do we foresee contractors particularly having when interacting with user agencies and with this newly consolidated GSA structure? And we're going to make sure you understand what are some of those complex issues that might now make managing your GSA schedule a little more complicated. All right, so as we move forward, it is what happened? Why did GSA go through this? GSA likes to take on big projects. I kind of, they're sort of like the Commonwealth of Virginia when Virginia takes on big road projects very well. Much easier than the state of Maryland does, but Virginia does big road projects. Well, GSA is known for doing big consolidation projects like this. This is the second one they've done. The first one was about 6 years ago when they consolidated 7 professional services schedules into the single professional service schedule. And so they tried it. They saw that there were some benefits and some challenges from the way they executed that. So when they decided to further consolidate it down to a single schedule, mostly because user agencies wanted that, they took those experiences into account, and I will tell you, they learned some lessons from that. This process has gone much smoother. The outcomes have been much better. They've pretty much stayed on target with their timelines on their transitions. There's been some movement in them, but as a general practice, we're finding it to be a pretty favorable, huge endeavor that they undertook to go through this. But we think they're doing a pretty good job. We would probably give them a B+ on this. And we are harsh critics because we are greatly impacted by how well these things go or how poorly they go. And so we're pretty harsh critics, but I think we would probably give them a B+. So I think that's doing really well. So why did they do this? Agencies forever, they just wanted to buy from a GSA schedule. Many times contracting officers at agencies didn't even know there were multiple GSA schedules. They thought there were only 2. There was a MOBIS and an IT. Well, that got, over the years, that got agencies and contractors in trouble because they wanted to buy everything, including the kitchen sink and interrogators, on IT or MOBA's contracts. Well, as you know, there were at times up to 30 different individual GSA schedules, and there was overlap between them, a lot of gray areas that crossed over the schedules. So it did make a lot of sense to see how we could look at all the different contracts, where did we have conflicting solicitation clauses, and try and bring a semblance of order to where it was just one contract. It will make it more efficiency for GSA eventually to manage these contracts. It certainly makes it easier for agencies to buy from these contracts, and that was one of their most overriding factors in this. Okay, so what we've laid out here, these were the three phases that encompass the consolidation process. Phase one was complete. That was when October 1st, Barbara mentioned, they released the new solicitation. There was a year or more, there was probably 15 months of work that GSA did in the year leading up to that new solicitation, but that was completed when they released it back in October last year. We're solidly in phase two now. Phase two is anyone who had a single schedule, and I think that was about 20% of you in the survey, where you have one schedule. It was you had an IT schedule, or you had an O3 fact contract, or you had a PSS contract. If you had one contract, then in January of this year, GSA released a mass modification to convert that, when executed, converts that single schedule into an MAS contract. Some terms and conditions and solicitation clauses will end up being updated, but the contract number and the contract period of performance remain the same. I think you have until July 31st to execute that mass modification to convert the original contract into a now MAS contract. That's phase two. Phase three, which I wrongly, and Vanessa will give me grief for this later, I wrongly predicted would be a minority of people on the call. I actually think more people in the poll said they had more than one schedule than those who had one schedule. So phase three is where, if you had more than one schedule, you have to go through a consolidation process that will integrate all of those into what will eventually be one contract. When we talked about GSA has been mostly on schedule, it's phase three that they're probably going to be delaying somewhat. It was originally thought they were going to be working on that in August of this year. It sounds like now they don't want to do it during year-end buying season, so they probably are going to push it to January, either fourth quarter calendar year or January of 2021. There'll be more information coming out about that. It's something we're closely monitoring. It affects the minority number of GSA schedule holders. It's only about 10% of all of the schedule holders are impacted by this phase three. So by completing phase one and two, they catch most of the people and get them caught up, and phase three will be the most complicated and the last phase. And we'll talk more about that later. So what happened? My team did a great job. Vanessa worked on this. This was something that we actually posted up on our blog earlier. What happened when they went from the original individual schedules over to MAS? Well, here are some of the, I'm not going to read this slide to you, but it's just to kind of see what was it before, what is it now. In general, instead of these individual 24 contracts where you had to submit a proposal in response to a solicitation, get a contract awarded, and then maintain each one of those individually. Now, if you're doing the same thing, you submit a single proposal against the one solicitation, and you identify which of these 12 large categories or 82 subcategories. You know, just for instance, some of the large categories are things like IT, professional services, office management. You know, they're big categories, and they generally may encompass one or more of the original GSA schedule areas. The individual names, as you see, went to a single name, MAS. NAICS code SINs were trimmed down significantly. We went originally from what was 900 SINs under the old structure when you looked across all of the 24 schedules, now down to about 300. There was a lot of overlap in special item numbers where you would have something like ancillary services. That particular SIN might have appeared in many different GSA schedule contracts before. Well, it doesn't make any sense to keep duplicating that when you have them all combined. You now will have a single size standard for one particular SIN. Previously, depending on what you were doing under the SIN, there may have been different NAICS codes associated with it, so the size standard could vary. They've made some things a little bit easier. You can, to add new labor category, to add new services-based SINs, the past performance projects that you have to describe have been reduced by 1. So some of the things are easier. The good news is coming out of this, eventually it will be easier from a contractor's perspective because you'll have a single point of contact with GSA. You won't have to work with different contracting officers and different offices all over the country, so forth. So here's kind of the changes between what happened.
There are also some additional changes that are still to come. GSA indicated that they're still tweaking the MAS SINs and that there will be a couple of new SINs coming during the next year. Two other items that are not specific to the MAS solicitation, but are just indicative of some of the changes GSA has been making. The former 72A sales reporting system where contractors will report their GSA sales has been replaced by the Federal Acquisition Service Sales Reporting Portal, or FAS-SRP. Anyone with an existing contract has been using that for a couple of quarters now. And if you are looking to get a new contract, which we saw about 50% of you are, formerly, GSA required submitting your past performance using the open rating system. Instead, now they'll be using CPARS, or the Contractor Performance Assessment Reporting System, as their preferred evaluation method.
So the previous slide talked about what's different. This slide talks about what's the same. There's some big things that are still the same. Your awarded items, your pricing, your contract number, your period performance, even though it's called something different, all of the original award elements are still the same. The price reductions clause that governs your contract, if you have it in your contract, still is operating the same way, even though they've slightly changed the number of it. It still operates the same way. Cooperative purchasing, it still applies. It has not been broadened. It only still applies where it applied previously. Order level materials are still limited to specific large categories as they were before. And we are going to talk a little bit later on about order level materials. And the transactional data reporting, which everyone refers to as TDR, that pilot, which started more than 3 years ago, has been extended through FY 2020. We fully expect that that's going to be probably extended again because they have not gotten grips on the data, the integrity of the data to know how they can use that pilot project, and being right in the middle of the consolidation is probably not the time to figure that out. so that we fully expect that that's going to be extended through the end of FY 2021.
So Hope, one of the things, as we saw in the poll, there are contractors who have one or more GSA schedules. There are just a couple of tips I want to give you if you have not already accepted the Phase 2 mass modification, which is called A8112. It's important that before you accept that mass mod, you understand how your existing SINs will map to the new MAS SINs. And GSA has some attachments on their website that will show you that exact mapping for each one of your current SINs. You need to double check those new SINs and the applicable NAICS codes and make sure that you have all of those NAICS codes in your SAM registration. If you have any exceptions on your contract now, or if you identify any exceptions based upon your review of the MAS solicitation terms and conditions, you need to make sure that you provide a written narrative to justify each requested exception. Exceptions are very rare, not the norm, but if you do feel that you need to take an exception to the terms and conditions, those have to be negotiated with your GSA contracting officer. And if you have any pending modifications in the eMod system, or if you're in the process of exercising an option for your contract, do not accept the mass modification until those modifications have been awarded. If you accept the mass mod before you have all of those pending modifications processed, you run the risk of those modifications being wiped out of the system.
Great information for us. So Phase 3, and we already know from the polling, this will impact some of you. As I mentioned before, it only impacts about 10% of GSA schedule holders. It's much higher percentage in our client base because our clients tend to have more GSA schedules. But for those affected contractors, you're going to have to make a decision, and what I'm going to talk about are some of the factors to think about when you're looking at your strategy for trying to figure out which schedule you want to be the surviving contract, because there are a lot of factors, and I certainly couldn't tell you all of the information you would need to make that decision because there are a lot of factors. But let's say you have 3 different GSA schedules. Only one of them will survive the Phase 3 consolidation. The other 2 will disappear. One of the big factors is it has to have at least, the surviving contract has to have at least 5 years left on the contract. So it needs to have a certain amount of runway left. So you can't pick one of the ones that's in the final option period. GSA is not going to let you consolidate down to that one. Other factors that you should take into consideration is your relationship with your contracting officer. You may have a very good relationship with one of them, and you may have a different relationship with the other 2. So that would be a consideration. Other factors might be, where do you have more sales? If the bulk of your sales are on one of your contracts and you have no sales on another one, GSA may not let you consolidate into the contract that has no sales. What are the components on the contract? The real biggest factor here is, right now, GSA guidance is telling us the only way to consolidate the contract items that are on the disappearing contracts into the surviving contract is to do it through modification, and you have to fully support it all over again. For instance, if you were adding labor categories that were already negotiated on a contract, but you needed to add them to your surviving contract, you have to show where you have sold those labor categories in the last 12 months, and you have to do a disclosure of the pricing again. That can be problematic. You may have only sold them on your GSA schedule, and you may not have sold them outside of that. Well, that becomes problematic when you're trying to now add them to your new contract. It's really unfortunate that GSA has taken the stand that you can't just if they're not relying on the negotiation that took place that got it onto the original contracts, because they got in trouble. This is one of the lessons learned from the PSS consolidation. When they did the PSS consolidation, they essentially just smashed it together and called it one contract and moved forward. And years later, GSA's Office of Inspector General office did an audit of that process and determined that GSA contracting officers did not do a determination that the prices were still fair and reasonable when they smashed them together. So that is now resulting in, when they do this consolidation, they have to determine that the prices are still fair and reasonable, and they have to be fully supported again. Some big challenges that we're a very frequent combination that people have is an IT schedule and a PSS contract. Well, you may have a lot of products and services. You may have specialty SINs like the cloud SIN or the cyber SIN or the electronic health check. And all of those have really, they have special requirements. So to have to go through that process again in order to get it on the surviving contract, which might be the PSS one, that's a big undertaking. So those are all things you have to take into consideration when you're trying to decide which contract do we want to survive. And every conversation changes with clients. We're having individual strategy sessions with our clients that are in this boat to try and figure out where we should go. And I can tell you that ones we've started with, there are already new factors that have come up that change it before we even get to the process. But we had one client that they had a BPA, a big 5-year BPA awarded and went against one of their contracts. Well, they of course want that to be on the surviving contract. So there are a lot of factors. So I want you to know it's going to take a lot of work to combine them. And there are a lot of factors you need to consider on when you're trying to figure out which one to be the surviving contract. So I think that's as thorough as we can cover that. I'm going to turn it over to Vanessa because she's going to let us know all of the things you need to be doing to be thriving in this environment.
Thank you, Hope. So one of the things that Barbara mentioned from the beginning is that we would go through some of the opportunities and challenges under the MAS consolidation, consolidated schedule. So I'm starting with opportunities, and one thing that is a huge plus is that there are lowered barriers to entry for both new and existing contractors. For existing contractors, you're now able to add new services to your contract via a modification, whereas previously you would have had to do a whole new schedule contract offer. So if you'd like to add IT SINs to your professional services schedule, you no longer have to get an IT contract. It's just a modification to add those SINs and possibly any related labor categories. For both new contractors and existing contractors, adding a SIN requires less past performance. As Hope mentioned, previously, most SINs required 2 projects or 2 statements of work to support the addition and prove that you were capable of doing that type of work. That requirement has now been reduced to 1 project per SIN, except for IT, which now requires 2 projects instead of 3. And the SINs have now been broadened. So the 900 SINs went to 300, which means each one of those 300 SINs now has a broader depth of experience for what you can perform. As an example, SIN 541611 encompasses what used to be the MOBIS SINs, the FAB SINs, so what was formerly separated into management consulting SINs or into financial SINs are now often captured under a single SIN. So you can do add a lot of experience to your schedule with only the addition of a few SINs. Excuse me. The consolidation of the schedule also means that there has been consolidated modification guidance. So there is increased consistency. You no longer have to know the rules that your PSSCO wants versus your ITCO. You'll have a single modification guidance. And this consolidation under a single schedule is more in line with the way that agencies like to buy the multidisciplinary service or product purchases. They no longer have to figure out which schedule to look under to find the contractors they need. Everything's all in one place. If you had two schedules, you may have had the experience of teaming with yourself in order to provide a full service package or full product and service package to the government. You'll no longer have to do that because you'll be able to have all of your items under a single schedule. And if you had teamed with other contractors, perhaps it's now easier for you to add additional experience to your own schedule. Hope mentioned the Transactional Data Reporting Program, or the TDR program. There are certain SINs which now may allow you to opt into the TDR program. And opting into TDR means that you no longer have to respond to or maintain a discount relationship related to the price reductions clause. So you no longer have to keep your commercial prices at a certain level related to your GSA prices. And you'll no longer have to disclose your commercial sales practices or the different discounts or ways that you sell to commercial customers. In exchange, the quarterly reporting that contractors who do have a traditional schedule have to do is increased to monthly reporting for contractors under the TDR program, with some additional line items and specifications that need to be provided to GSA. One of the opportunities that we specifically wanted to highlight is related to the order level material SIN. While this SIN did exist prior to the MAS schedule, it was separated under each of the applicable schedules that it applied to. One of the consolidations is that those separate SINs are now one single SIN called OLM. And OLMs are an easier way to add supplies and services to your task order if those items are not already on your schedule at the master level. So OLMs are not priced or defined at the schedule contract level. They're added at the task order level, and it may eliminate the need for open market items, which many agents and CEOs not only just avoid, but they specifically will put on their RFP or RFQ that open market items are not allowed. Common ways that you might use order level materials include if you are adding a subcontractor to your task order whose rates or qualifications don't fit in your GSA schedule structure. If you cannot bill them through your rates, it may make sense to add that contractor as an order level material. If you also need some additional equipments or materials to fulfill the task order that are not already on your schedule, using the order level materials is a good SIN, is a good way to do that. Most importantly, it's important to remember that OLMs must be in direct support of the task order, and they cannot be the primary purpose of your task order. They cannot exceed 1/3 or 33.33% of the total value of your task order or the cumulative value of your BPA. OLMs are considered to be schedule items, so unlike ODCs or other direct cost or open market items, OLMs are required to be reported as GSA sales, and the industrial funding fee of 0.75% or 0.75% must be included on your OLM sales. Related to the COVID-19 pandemic, GSA has made some additional openings of the way agencies can use GSA schedules to get the services and products that they need, and allowing contractors to provide those items to agencies in an easier fashion. One of the changes was that COVID-19 was declared a federal emergency, and as such, it opened up the GSA and the VA schedules for state and local use. If you have the disaster recovery program awarded to SINs on your contract, and you would typically know that because the disaster recovery SIN would be in your profile on eLibrary, state and local governments are now able to buy from your schedule. One suggestion is making sure that this icon is on your GSA price list and in your profile so state and local agencies know that you participate in the program and they can buy from your schedule. In addition, GSA's Federal Acquisition Service is temporarily allowing non-Trade Agreements Act compliant products to be sold to the government for some limited categories of products, which are called federal supply classes. They have specific instructions to do a modification to add these non-TAA compliant products. And when you get the copy of the presentation, you'll be able to click on this last link. There's an RFI out to industry to get more information on how industry can provide personal protective equipment to the federal government. Now we're going to turn to some of the changes that relate to the MAS consolidation. The new broader service and product categories are a good thing, but on the other hand, that bigger pool of contractors, whereas you may have been one of 300 contractors that had a particular SIN before, now you might be one of 3,000 contractors or more that have the new MAS SIN. That bigger pool means it will be harder for agencies to see you and to understand what your special qualifications are. So it's definitely more critical that your price list and your website highlight your specific experience related to providing the service or product that agencies are looking for. In addition, if you're familiar with doing modifications under your old legacy schedule, the requirements and guidance and templates are definitely different for MAS than they were for the legacy schedules. In addition, those guidance and templates are continuously changing. So if you're doing a modification, it's important to make sure that you start by going to the GSA website to make sure that you're using the most up-to-date guidance and templates. Hope talked about figuring out if you have multiple contracts, which CO or CS, contracting officer or contracting specialist, you work with the best. And that is definitely something you want to consider if you are consolidating multiple schedules. It is also important to note, however, that your CO or CS may change. Even if they stay the same, your CO or CS may be unfamiliar with your services and products if you're adding new SINs or consolidating other schedules. They are working to become more familiar with the MAS guidance and templates. So it is possible that you may know more about the templates if you're doing your third modification than your CO might. And be aware that despite the very comprehensive guidance for MAS modifications, COs and CSs can still ask you for additional information. The more you attend GSA webinars or webinars like this one with Aronson as a result of VIP, it's possible that you may know more than your CS. So it's important that you advocate for yourself when submitting modifications and receiving questions from GSA. There are going to be some things that are the same in terms of compliance under MAS and some things that are different. One of the benefits is that it will be easier to satisfy the $25,000 in required sales if you're consolidating multiple schedules, instead of needing to get $25,000 to maintain your PSS schedule and an additional $25,000 to maintain your IT schedule. You'll just need $25,000 annually on your MAS single schedule. As the SINs are more expansive, it will be easier for you to identify, track, and report your GSA schedule sales, and to avoid scope issues like Hope was talking about before, doing the wrong type of work under the wrong type of schedule. It's all a single schedule now, and it'll be easier to eliminate those types of compliance issues. An additional change that happened with the introduction of MAS is that the FAR 51 deviation, which allowed other schedule contractors to buy off of your schedule on behalf of the government, the deviation allowed that to happen on time and materials and fixed price contracts. The removal of the deviation means that contractors or primes can only buy off of your schedule if they are doing cost plus contracts. So that's important to remember in terms of compliance. If a commercial prime buys off of your schedule, remember that GSA considers that to be a commercial sale unless you have a FAR 51, not FAR 51 deviation, unless you have a FAR 51 letter of authorization from the federal government giving them permission to do so. It's possible that your audit risk from the Office of Inspector General under a consolidated schedule may increase or decrease. So you may have decreased risk, which is great, because you're in this bigger pool of contractors. It's easier to be a small fish because your sales may not be at the top of that larger pool, larger number of contractors. And as a small fish, you may avoid audit selection. But there is also some increased risk. For multiple schedule holders, concentration of your sales to a single contract may make you a high volume contract compared to other contracts. And it's possible that the ease of agency use in using this consolidated GSA schedule could concentrate your sales under GSA. And if you stop having those commercial sales, it would erode your commercial basis of award. So when we talked about the price reductions clause and having commercial prices and needing to have a discount relationship between those commercial prices and your GSA prices, if you start to skew heavily to GSA and reduce your commercial sales, you start to eliminate that basis for your GSA pricing based on your commercial prices. So I want to share some best practices for compliance with you. I would say our number one issue and suggestion is making sure that you continue to maintain your digital certificate. You had to have a digital certificate in order to submit your original offer, and you will need this digital certificate if you want to initiate mods with GSA to add SINs, add labor categories, change your prices, change the contract administrator. You need a digital certificate for all of these things. You don't want to get to the point where GSA is ready to award your mod and you don't have a digital certificate to sign off on that. It will delay the process and it could lead to GSA rejecting your modification as they have time guidelines that they try to adhere to. Make sure that you have a system to accurately identify, track, and report your GSA sales either every quarter or every month, depending on what the basis for your contract, if it's a CS, commercial sales practices-based contract, or a TDR pilot contract. You have to report those sales and pay the IFF on time. So 30 days after the end of each quarter, the sales need to be reported. Even if there are 31 days, your report and your payment is due within 30 days. You have to maintain that minimum $25,000 a year on your GSA schedule and monitor that discount relationship with your commercial customers or your basis of award if you have that type of contract. That's not applicable to TDR. And if you have any discounts that you've negotiated with GSA, then you need to make sure that you continue to extend those discounts, which might be quantity discounts or payment or discounts that the government will get if they pay promptly or pay within a quicker time frame. That would be your prompt payment discount. When you see that you have added new services or added new labor categories or made a new staff hire, and that would be a good time to add that type of product, service, personnel, labor category to your GSA schedule, make sure that you initiate those modifications. When you receive mass modifications, such as the mass modification to move from the legacy schedule or old schedules to the MAS schedule, you need to respond in a timely manner. Again, the Phase 2 Mass Mod A8112 needs to be responded to by July 31st. If you don't reply by July 31st, GSA may remove your price list from their system. After you accept the mass mod, your GSA price list needs to be updated to reflect those terms and conditions and the MAS SINs within 30 days. Make sure that you prepare for GSA contractor assessments. These may happen as frequently as every year. And there is also an end of term assessment, which happens in the 4th year of your 5-year contract period, that is a little bit more intensive than the annual assessment, where GSA goes over your sales tracking system, your discount relationship, looking at resumes to make sure that the people you're staffing on jobs are qualified. All of those things will be run through at an assessment. You need to make sure your GSA price list stays up to date. There must be either an update or a verification that your price list is still current at least every 24 months. The System for Award Management, or SAM, needs to be updated on an annual basis, and you need to make sure that you are maintaining and retaining your GSA contract files so you can provide them upon request by the government. Here we have a list of some resources that will be helpful to you following the presentation related to getting access to that SIN mapping that I talked about. That would be the first link, and also looking at the modification requirements if you're looking to do some modifications to your contract. The others are also very good informational links on GSA, and there are specific links related to order level materials and COVID-19. Aronson's website has some really helpful blogs and webinars that can help you related to GSA or government contracting in general. I have a list here of some recent blogs that we've done. So if you use this link, you can get to them and take a look at some information that may be helpful to you related to the consolidation, related to compliance, related to OIG audits, and order level materials. We also have a COVID-19 hub on the website, and we've provided some general government contracting industry information. So some information related to GSA, but also information related to the excusable delays clause, the CARES Act, and PPP loans. I'm going to turn it back over to Hope now to give us some final insights.
Great, thanks, Vanessa. So the first thing you see here is do your homework. You may have already signed off on that mass modification that turned it into a mass contract. That was a large document, and there was, I don't know, a couple hundred pages of documents there. If you have never read your GSA schedule from cover to cover, you need to do that again now. Those clauses, it's amazing to me how often we talk to companies that have GSA schedule contracts and they don't understand that there are certain rules and regulations in them, and it's very obvious to us that no one has ever read the contract. You got to read the contract. This is the time to do it. There's also a lot of attachments, the large category attachments. So any of the large categories you have on your contract, you need to read the associated attachment. And as we can't harp enough on these modification instructions in the new guidance. So as we mentioned before, those are new. Don't go using the same instructions you did previously. They're changing on a frequent basis. So go and look at what it is now so you use the correct one.
There's also some good news that we wanted to make sure we left you with, that as Hope said, you know, we definitely give GSA a solid B+. The MAS transition is going extremely well. GSA is really open to comments from industry. I've provided a bunch of comments and received very positive feedback and appreciation for giving them information that industry would find helpful. And there's just a lot of opportunities that are available to you as a government contractor under this new single schedule. One thing related to the COVID-19 pandemic, GSA's CIO, David Shive, has said that the coronavirus has caused only minimal disruption for GSA. Previously, they had already 50% of their employees working remotely, and they're now up to 90%. And working with GSA every day, I can tell you we have not seen a slowdown in the work that they are doing. They are, it looks like now, even getting through some of the backlog that may have been on their plates before.
Great. So some of the cautions, you need to be prepared as contractors for a couple of years of unpredictability as we all adjust to the new normal. Agencies will have to adjust, but GSA is going to have to adjust more. As we mentioned before, depending on how you end up getting assigned or how you end up selecting your survivor contract, your contracting professionals are likely to be working in a world that they have never worked in before. And you may have someone that spent their entire career negotiating contracts for scientific equipment that now may also have to negotiate IT cloud services and facility maintenance contracts. So it's an entirely different world. And yes, GSA says they're going to have some resources that are going to be available to provide assistance to everyone, but it's going to take a while before everyone adopts this new environment. And I know for sure that Vanessa understands the whole consolidation process better than any individual contracting officer at GSA, because she has been so intimately involved, working very closely with the dedicated program management office that was running this, that we've had to figure out. That's why I keep telling her that we're going to send GSA a bill for the quality control that she's doing for them, because she's had to dig deep into the details of this for the purposes of my team understanding it for all of our clients. And individual contracting officers in field offices don't have that insight and visibility that we do. So it's going to be a while before everyone gets on board with this new normal. And to layer that on top of what we're already seeing because of the pandemic as a new normal may make it take a little bit longer. There's going to have to be a lot of training that takes place once they start having to negotiate areas outside of where they had previously been familiar with. But the good news is user agencies are going to love this. And hopefully that results in more scheduled sales going through. It's too early to know if the ease is actually going to be sales. We hope it is. GSA hopes it is. That's why one of the big initiatives behind this, they were trying to react to agency requests. Let's hope it does. It would help everyone. GSA has been very responsive to industry comments. We know because we've given them many, but they really have. They've worked throughout the whole process. They work very closely with industry and agencies in a very thoughtful process to go about this consolidation. Obviously, industry is not happy with everything that ended up getting into the consolidation, but they did have a voice in the process. And as I said, my final thought is just because you can add a new SIN doesn't mean that you should add everything. Just to give you an example, we had one client recently that called and said they signed the mass modification, so now their individual contract was now an MAS contract, and now that in their eyes the world was their oyster. And we talked to them and they said, we want to add 8 new SINs in 3 new large category areas. Well, the one thing I will tell you is, if you try to do all of that and it lands in a contracting officer's hands, they're going to put it at the very bottom of the stack and try and fight every reason in the world to do everything else before that, because that is a lot of work. Because what that would essentially be, that would have been 3 separate contracts before, and it would have been, it's just a lot of work. So what I understand over time, you may want to do that, but you really need to develop a strategy. And you never want to add more than 1 large category at a time. So really think about what you need and the order in which you need it, and have a thoughtful approach. Like if you want to do that, have a plan to do that over the course of a year, not in the next month. So that's a big thing, that just because you can doesn't mean that you should. All right, so the next thing we're going to talk about is 5 top ways to lose money after the contract is awarded. We say this just because this was true before MAS consolidation. This has always been true. The #1 reason is people lose money is because they don't understand the discount relationship. Everyone understands how to sell with their GSA schedule. What they don't understand is how it works. You really have to understand that discount relationship. Who's your most favorite customer? What's your basis of award? What's the discount relationship? They fail to understand that when you need to reduce your prices on your schedule because you sold cheap at lower prices to a basis award customer. They fail to increase their prices when they're allowed to. They don't seek economic price adjustments when they're entitled to it. Biggest reason, I'll talk to a company and they say, well, you know, our GSA schedule used to be good, but for the last couple of years, it's just not been as good. And when I ask them all the questions, they failed to do modifications when they could have. And at every point that they failed to do it, they started losing money. So GSA schedules are incredibly flexible, but GSA doesn't tell you to do these things. You have to know that there are things happening in your business that trigger these actions. You failed to extend negotiated discounts. Vanessa mentioned that when she was talking about preparing a compliance measure, making sure the mere fact that you failed to put that prompt payment discount, well, one, shame on you for negotiating a prompt payment discount first. But if you foolishly did, you have to put that on every invoice that you send out. And because if you fail to put it on an invoice and GSA finds that out later, they will take the value of that invoice, because they'll say, you didn't tell us. If you had have told us, we would have paid in time to take it, so therefore you owe it to us. Another thing, they do not, they use personnel on the contract that are not qualified under the labor categories under which they're sold, whether those are the contractor's personnel or subcontractor personnel. You need to make sure everyone billing through a GSA schedule explicitly meets the qualifications and that you have a resume that supports that. These are all things that keep happening in GSA OIG audits. They're happening for everybody. So these are the biggest reasons why you might lose money. And I know we're short on time, so I'm going to turn it back to Barbara in case some questions came in.
Thank you so much, Hope. And I love that last slide, because we're all in, you know, they're all in business to make money. So if, you know, if there's some things that they're doing that are preventing that, that's a great last slide and great information that you and Vanessa provided today. I want to thank you both for this incredible information, explaining the MAS, the GSA consolidation to everyone, and next steps and phases. And I really want to thank you for the resource page, which is quite helpful with all the links. And I want to echo how wonderful your blog is. To go to your website, take advantage of your incredible blog with information and about for government contractors and all information about COVID as well. So always a great resource, and I want to thank you for that for all of us here. And I want to thank our participants as well. We did have a question that came up that is I don't know if you even want to take it, but we're going to go for it. Brian wants to know, is there any talk within the GSA about taking over the federal supply schedule from the VA?
Oh, we wish. We wish. I laugh about this, but as a firm, Aronson made the decision 3 years ago that we were no longer going to support VA schedules for exactly this reason. You can't get anything done through that VA acquisition office. It's horrible. Brian, if you're trying to work with them, bless you, because I understand. There is no talk. There is not a talk about it. Years ago, the GSA and VA OIG offices used to coordinate together, and even that has kind of deviated, and we don't even hear any inklings of that anymore.
Mm-hmm.
It's very difficult to work. I don't have good news for you. I do not think that they are going to take it over.
Okay, well, good insight on that. And Brian says, yeah, they drive him crazy too. So, anyway, so that was interesting. I also wanted to respond to a question about simplified acquisitions. I want to let our participant know that we actually did a webinar on simplified acquisitions. If you go to the VIP resource page, you can find that webinar that's on file there that will help you understand how to maximize opportunities with simplified acquisition. Any other questions that we have? We're out of time. We'll certainly get them over to the to Vanessa and Hope for response. I want to thank both Hope and Vanessa for today's and thank our participants for attending today's webinar, and to the SBA for making it possible. As we mentioned at the beginning of today's broadcast, a video recording of this presentation will be available later this afternoon on the VIP resource page, and the slides and the PowerPoint will also be made available following this broadcast. Thank you again for your participation, and we wish you and your families and your businesses health and success in the months to come. Thank you again, and stay safe and healthy.